This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Precision Optics. Thank you Sitka Gear and Precision Optics for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back at the microphone. Today we have some good friends, some leaders in our conservation space, and I'll just go around the horn. We're starting off with our chair, who is Chris Everett. She is the chair of the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, and she also is a representative. I won't get the title right, so I'll leave that to you later, Chris, as SCI Canada. We've got our co-chair, vice chair, Brian McRae, Delta Waterfowl, and out of the East Coast, we got Doug Chiasson. Doug was on the podcast recently for Institute of Canada. And today we're going to talk about the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners. And we've talked a little bit about it on the podcast here. Some of you may have heard Mark Hall. It was on his podcast. Really good introduction, and recently launched Collaborative. And we're going to dive into that today. So we've got 4 founding partners. The Society, Wild Sheep Society BC is one of those, along with SCI Canada, Delta Waterfowl, and the Fur Institute of Canada. So really exciting initiative. We've had it going now for almost a better part of a few weeks, and really excited to sort of dive into it, see where we're at, what's developed. So before we went live, there was lots of dialogue about where we're at now and what is this thing, and lots of questions. So one of the things we're going to tackle right off the get-go, and I think Doug's going to walk us through this with the support of, I guess, all three, of what CWCP is and sort of why they exist and what they're doing. So let's welcome to the podcast, first of all. Great to get all 4 of us together, and look forward to sort of fleshing this thing out. So Doug, if you want to kick it off for us and just exactly articulate what it is that CWCP does.
Repeat exactly what I said before we hit record. I'll do my best. Exactly. Thanks, Kyle, for having me back. Glad to be back here on the podcast. I think that I shouldn't say I think. I know that CWCP is a new exciting new mission here for all of us here, and we're all excited to see how it plays out over the months, years, decades to come. But I think there's a lot that we need to do to help people understand what it is CWCP is, and in some ways what CWCP isn't. And first and foremost, I think that it'll be good for folks to understand, CWCP is a collaboration between organizations. We're not creating a new organization with a brick and mortar office and mailbox and business cards and things like that. The CWCP is really a way for groups in the hunting and trapping space from across Canada to help, amplify our collective efforts, and to help connect, those of us from across the country that may not have another space in which all of us can connect through the CWCP and say, here's an issue. Maybe it's a federal issue, a national issue, saying here's a federal issue that we here at the Fur Institute of Canada think is important. We're going to bring that to the CWCP, make sure all the CWCP members are aware of it, and say, we've written a letter to Minister so-and-so at Department XYZ in the federal government. Who else would like to sign this letter along with us as through the CWCP? So we end up, instead of just, I sent a letter this week because I heard about it, and then a couple weeks later, Kyle, you send a letter on the same issue from Sheep Society, and 3 weeks later, the Nova Trappers Association Nova Scotia sends a letter. Instead, we can all work together, put together, one letter that we all can stand behind, and, ideally end up with 10, 15, 20, 25 different organizations all standing united and saying, this is an important issue to us. And, I use in my example, I'm talking about a federal issue, a national issue, but, something that we hope the CWCP can do in the future is also to help uplift the efforts of organizations that are working at the provincial level, and to say, hey, here's this thing that's going on in Saskatchewan that's really concerning, that if it happens in Saskatchewan, maybe it'll happen elsewhere. But if we all stand together and bring pressure from across Canada, from different hunting groups, different trapping groups, and say, hey, this thing needs to, we don't want you to do this. Or alternatively, say, you just did something we're super impressed that you did, we're super happy about. We want to encourage you and thank you and congratulate you on doing this great thing for hunters, this great thing for trappers. And it's not only the handful of groups in your province that are paying attention to this, but there's dozens of organizations from across the country that want to take a moment and give you a tip of the hat and say good job. Because we also want to be able to encourage good decision making. We don't always want to just be saying no to bad decision making. And ideally, we can get to a position where more decision makers in Canada at the provincial and federal levels are thinking about doing good things because they get their flowers for doing so, instead of just moving on to the next thing. So, that's really the core element of the CWCP, and the number one tool of the CWCP will be, circulating these letters to decision makers and really working towards getting as many voices behind that message as possible.
Great. That gives us a lot of perspective, Doug. Has nothing been done before on this scale nationally? Sort of, what is the history of this? And if not, why the heck not? Maybe, Chris, if you don't mind jumping into a little bit about, any historical, and I know you worked in government before this, and on the hunting file specifically and conservation. Touch a little bit on what exists out there and why is it so important that we have CWCP? What role are they going to play in this space?
Well, there definitely has been attempts to build something before on a national scale, but they just haven't had the inclusive aspect that we strove to have as part of the CWCP. We wanted to make sure that we were including any organization that is in the hunting, trapping, and conservation space that felt that they wanted to be part of something bigger. And so just having that mandate and trying to include as many voices as possible to bring everyone together to speak together on these issues that are important was a big tenet that we all stood behind when we were talking about this and building it and communicating on it with the American Wildlife Conservation Partners, which is what we loosely based ours off of. And so it's been fascinating to see just as we've been growing and the feedback that we've been receiving from organizations that this is something that has been needed and I think that's the beauty and the path that we took is having that inclusivity aspect to who can be involved and who we want to be involved. It has been the key because we're able to bring all these voices together for the betterment of our community and protecting our hunting heritage in Canada and our trapping heritage and just the history that we have in Canada. So I think that's what sets CWCP apart is that aspect of it. And, we're not going after grants. We're not going after any of those sort of other working groups that are out there that do these stuff or that are in specific kind of silo spaces, which is great work that they're doing. But we wanted to be able to bring together an advocacy tool that organizations could feel comfortable joining on and that we can reunite the hundreds and millions of hunters and firearms owners and conservationists across the country, and have something that we could all be proud of.
That's great. Brian, one thing I'd like to explore a little bit is, I know you were involved and Delta Waterfowl was involved in the creation of CWCP. Was there an aha moment where you specifically or your organization realized that an organization like CWCP was critical? Sort of talk about your kind of, come to Jesus moment where you're like, hey, we need to get this going and we need to do something collectively as a nation to have a voice for hunters and trappers?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And, it's probably a two-part answer. Obviously, One, we've Delta Waterfowl has always been a long-standing partner of the AWCP. So, it existed down in the United States. Much like everyone else on this podcast, kind of been around for a while, and we've seen lots of issues come up, both at provincial levels, national levels. We've seen organizations come together, and we've seen organizations kind of trying to, fight the good fight on their own. And over the last few years, it has become increasingly clear, at least it had for me, that we needed to get to a space where we could bring voices together without any pressure. And what I mean by that is, obviously we talk about, the inclusivity piece of this, whether you're, a giant organization in Canada, or you're a small organization and maybe you don't have paid staff, et cetera, and you're strictly volunteer based, equally are as important. And when issues come up, either at the provincial level or the national level, there are times when organizations might not have their voice heard for reasons X, Y, or Z. And the beauty about the CWCP, about bringing those together under kind of one collaborative and having an inclusive, I'll call it a body of representatives across Canada, is that you can bring those voices together in a very controlled manner to deliver a very strong message, depending on the topic. And one of the things that really appealed to us is, as you will see as we go on, the CWCP doesn't have any pressure on organizations. So there's no pressure on an organization to sign on to a letter if it doesn't fit for whatever reason. It's not like you have to join the CWCP and you have to, add your signature to every letter. That's just not feasible. And at the end, it doesn't really make sense, because every organization represents different membership goals and mandates, et cetera, et cetera. But for us, it was really about trying to unite Canadians who all are strongly passionate about our heritage activities, and bring them together in a strong, unified voice, whether it's at the national level, whether it's at the provincial level, to really engage folks, I guess, is probably the best way of putting it. So when discussions kind of started, loose discussions on the CWCP, obviously, knowing most of the folks around this table for quite a while, and kind of having some sidebar conversations with them, and when we really started to kind of talk about it, it really started to excite me. I don't want to speak with everyone else, but I know it excited everyone else. And that was kind of when it really started to hit home, is the past couple of years, and, just started talking about it and seeing how powerful the AWCP is in the States, and the things that they can accomplish. It really gets your minds wandering and excited about what we can do here in Canada. And we've got a lot of great organizations representing a lot of great people in Canada. And if there's an opportunity for us to bring them together when the topic or the issue or the hey, thanks opportunity comes up, then let's do it, because the sky's the limit, and we can accomplish a lot of great things with a lot of great minds and a lot of great organizations.
That's a lot of great perspective. So you talked about different orgs. We've been in business now for 3 weeks, give or take, I think on Saturday. How's it started? Chris, I know that you're collating the list there, and I think there was an announcement you made yesterday. Where do we sit for membership? I'm kind of curious on who's gotten involved. And the key for me is like, how diverse is our group? And I think that's the cool part. If we get a very diverse group, I think that's a real success. So do you have a list for us that you can kind of go through of who's joined to date?
Yeah, of course. So I believe we're up to 14 organizations as partners now. So what started with the four of us just 3 weeks ago. We're now up to 14. Plus, we have 3 affiliates that have joined on. So the affiliate aspect of the CWCP, they're not necessarily a hunting or trapping advocacy organization, but they definitely support the work that we do, or they're adjacent in the industry, and we find them just as important to be part of the CWCP. So it's really exciting. We have some amazing organizations that have joined on. We've got some fish and game associations. We have a wildlife federation. We've got some of the guide outfitter organizations, and we have representation from coast to coast, which is amazing to see. All the way from BC to Newfoundland, Manitoba. We've got groups from Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia. We're having conversations with New Brunswick, PEI, Saskatchewan. So this is an ever-growing list, and I'm really excited for how much it's growing and the direction that we're going. All total, I think, looking at all of the membership of the organizations that have joined so far, we're speaking for close to 200,000 Canadians, which is amazing for us to grow that quickly, and for organizations to see exactly what we're doing and support what we're doing and the direction that this is going. I think it's, I said it earlier, it's been long overdue, and I think we were able to find something that was very reasonable for organizations to stand behind and to join in, and that's why we're growing so quick. And I'm really excited for the continuing conversations that we have with organizations that are jumping on board, and really excited to see how much it continues to grow.
Outstanding. Can you touch a little bit on anyone that might be interested, how they get involved? What's the process about someone that wants to join the CWCP?
So your best bet is to go to our website, CanadianWildlifePartners.ca. There's a lot of information there. The list of the partners and the affiliates are on the website, and contact information. There's an email you can reach us at, and there's also the form itself to fill out. So it's a simple application form. We're just looking for kind of what are your primary areas of focus, what additional resources do you look at and do you advocate for, and then your main point of contact. And as always, we always have an attestation. So this is simple that, you're not going to pressure other organizations to sign on to letters. And that is a very basic tenet that we all stand behind, that your organization will have the autonomy to stand behind your own beliefs. And if there's a letter that comes up that you don't stand behind, totally fine. There's no pressure to sign on. We just love that you're there to support the CWCP right from the get-go. So the attestation is just a signature from your primary contact, and then you just send it off to us, and we'll have a quick meeting with the steering committee, and then you're approved and you're part of the group.
Outstanding. Appreciate that, Chris. Doug, Canada has a ton of great conservation NGOs, a lot of great work being done. But the hardest CWCP is collaboration. And, that's one of the things I think that we identified as a group early on, that was we needed more collaboration across. What makes collaboration so darn difficult in Canada? Is it geographical? Is it competing interests? What makes it so challenging to get everybody on the same page on some of these issues? All the stress and pressure we get on the hunting and trapping industry, you'd think it'd be pretty freaking easy to get on the same page, but yet we struggle. So what do you feel is the heart of that, those challenges, Doug?
Yeah, I think that a big part of it is we're a big country, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of, it's very easy as an organization to get kind of, tunnel vision on just your issues. And whether that's a geographically, if you're a provincial organization, you're only looking at what's going on in your province. If you're a species specific or kind of pursuit specific organization, it's really easy to only look at waterfowl, or really easy to only look at trapping, or really easy to only look at wild sheep. But really what I think is exciting about the CWCP is, in a lot of ways, it's going to make sure that we have eyes on all of these things at the same time across all of the partners. And someone can say, someone can throw up the flag and say, hey, in PEI, not to pick on PEI, in PEI, hey, there's these changes happening, and we're concerned about what they're doing, and we're worried that if they do it here where no one's paying attention because it's PEI, that then all of a sudden there will be other provinces that look at what PEI did and said, oh, we're going to do that too, and all of a sudden it becomes a much bigger issue. That really having all of us on the lookout, and just as much in the positive direction as well, of hey, we just did this awesome thing. I can speak from, here in Nova Scotia, our natural resource minister just finally gave us Sunday hunting and added a week of deer season. There's something to be said for making sure that people across the country and organizations across the country, get to see the wins too, and say like, hey guys, it can be an uphill climb in some of our jurisdictions on hunting and trapping issues, and say, hey, there is good news out there. There are good decisions getting made out there, and maybe, your province, your minister just made a decision that's really great. And by ensuring that all the other partners in the CWCP know about it, well, maybe, here in my province, I go, well, we've been trying to get our minister to do that. We've been trying to get our government to do that for years. And they always say, well, no one else has done it yet. And maybe I would never know that got done in Saskatchewan. But now, by virtue of the CWCP, my group can go to our provincial government and say, hey, Saskatchewan has done it, now you should do it. So there's kind of that communication part of, we're a big country with a lot of hunters, a lot of organizations, a lot of trappers, a lot of trapping organizations, that, really we've lacked kind of a clearinghouse, a central point of information. And, there's been attempts in the past to try and get past that, some of them led by government, things like the Conservative Hunting and Angling Caucus that we're all very familiar with. Before that, the Hunters and Anglers Advisory Panel. But, I really think that it's better for us as a movement, for us to be in control and for us to be the voice as the hunting and trapping community, and not reliant on government, not reliant on MPs, or not reliant on ministers to be the source of that cooperation and collaboration. That instead we can bring this as ourselves, as our community, and bring this to government. And, I think that one of the things that will be very important, and is very important, will continue to be very important with CWCP, is what Chris was just speaking to, was the fact that we're not going to turn this into a place where we like browbeat individual organizations into signing letters and say, hey, you gotta be on side with us on this, and we took a majority vote, so we're good. Because that's been the end of previous attempts to try and organize hunting and trapping organizations, across the country or at provincial levels, things like the Canadian Outdoor Heritage Alliance, that died on, they came to an issue where there was a very strong divide between one side of the group and the other side of the group. And, there was no way through that. Whereas in CWCP, if Brian puts forward something, a letter that I go, well, not really a great fit for the Fur Institute, we actually have a bit of a different opinion on that, and we wouldn't be comfortable on that. We can have a discussion and say, hey, can we tweak this, and then find something we're all on side with. But if not, then, we shake hands and walk opposite directions, and I choose not to put the Fur Institute's name on it, and CWCP continues on happy and hunky-dory, and next letter I come up with something from the Fur Institute and Brian happily signs and on behalf of Delta, and we're all good. It's kind of a check your guns at the door, and let's have an honest conversation, but not a, you have to go along with what everyone is doing. Here's peer pressure, all the cool kids are doing it type approach.
Yeah, that's really good, Doug. And so it brings up a question for me, is how do we manage these competing priorities? So obviously there's the ability to sign on or not sign on. So, and as an individual organization, you have that ability to make that decision. But Brian, can you highlight maybe for us, how do you manage those competing priorities? So somebody comes to the partners and says, I want to advance this issue. And maybe it's not, how do you manage those competing priorities? There's so many orgs and I imagine it's going to be easier now when we're small, when we grow to sort of ideally hundreds of organizations representing thousands of people, and there's these competing interests, how do we prioritize what's important and what gets advanced to a letter and what doesn't even make the cut? If you could provide a little bit of context on that.
Yeah, and I think that's truthfully part of the exciting part about it. We touched on it earlier about, Canada's a pretty darn big space, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. So as we grow and as we have more voices and names and organizations on the list, being able to bring those issues forward, some that we may never hear. But I say this to our members all the time, specifically in Ontario. Ontario is a big spot. I'm in Ontario, but I don't hear about a lot of the things going on, and we rely on the ears of our members and our chapters, right, to bring it forward. So, I think this is part of the thing that's really exciting about it, because I can't wait for that, to be very honest, because we're going to be engaging more, and we're going to have a more unified voice, because people are going to be working together in a cohesive, inclusive way. They'll feel comfortable about bringing something forward. So, whether you're in Northwest Territories or you're in Newfoundland, it doesn't matter where you are. If something comes up, they can send a letter in, send a note, send an email into the CWCP, and we could have 10 other organizations sending notes on different things. They're all important, because, if an organization is taking time to send something in, it's important to them. And if they're part of the CWCP, then it's important to us as a collaborative, because as we talked about, if it happens over here quietly, it's very easily transported over here. And all of a sudden now, whether, I'll just use access as a prime example, because access is kind of a topic everywhere. But every time we lose something, it's increasingly more difficult to get it back. So I don't really necessarily look at it from a prioritization standpoint as an opportunity. And I always joke about this. I tend to be a kind of a glass half full as opposed to half empty kind of approach all the time. And, I actually welcome, and I get excited about the opportunity of several organizations sending in issues at once, because we're going to be engaged more. And the more time we are advocating for our members, and I'm using the collective we here, our members, our supporters, our donors, our prospective members, donors, and supporters, that means we're having conversations with the folks making the decisions, whether at the provincial level, at the federal level. And the more they see our name put forward on various topics, they'll also have a better understanding that we are watching very closely and we are advocating for our folks. And, we talked about this before the official launch in kind of group chats in Alberta when we were attending the AWCP meetings, as well as in times when we were in Ottawa. But, it's an exciting opportunity for us to engage folks at every level. And wouldn't it be great if we can get to a point like the AWCP has, where decision makers are starting to reach out to them in advance of coming out with something? Wouldn't it be great if the CWCP got to the point, because we're engaging on so many issues and we're being the respected, the reputable, the reliable voice of outdoor enthusiasts in our hunting and trapping space? I get excited about that. So I don't actually look at it more of a prioritization piece. Is it could get to a point where we're like, wow, there's a lot going on, but there's already a lot going on, and at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. So I get excited about that. About let's as we continue to grow, we've grown from 4 to 17 here in 3 weeks. I know that we'll probably start to get more letters sent in for support from across the country. And I welcome that. I look forward to that. And can't wait till the CWCP is a common name that all politicians start to see.
Well said. You mentioned priorities and different issues. Chris, I don't know if you're maybe able to touch on. I know we created a pillars document on some of the things that we're probably going to engage in, things that are going to be, and again, the partners will be driving this, of course. But what do you see the core priorities right now of the CWCPR that we're going to have to deal with, or is there a specific priority right now that is front of mind that we're going to have to address as a collaborative?
Well, when we all talked about what the direction or what any of the priorities are, because obviously we were aware that people were going to be asking, what direction is the CWCP going to focus on? Are some of the issues that we're aware of, like as an organization potentially joining, are they going to be focused on with the CWCP? And that's the joy of it, like you just alluded to, that the partners can help drive the pillars and the focus areas of the CWCP, because ultimately it's going to be constantly changing. As issues come up, we need to be able to address them in Canada as a collective, because, the common thread here is what's happening in one part of the country can and likely will happen in another part of the country. And so, areas of focus that we've kind of identified already is the common, access. We need to make sure that access is protected for all hunters and all Canadians and all trappers. And, so that's an area that we're going to try to navigate and to work with our partners and work with politicians on. Other areas, obviously, firearms come up within our collective groups. So that's something that we need to be aware of and we need to be standing together on. And, regionally, there's always going to be little conservation measures, tag allocations and stuff like that that are going to come up that we're going to have to address and reach out to politicians and hopefully help guide that policy and decision making as a collective group from across the country. And those are just kind of some of the key highlighted areas that, we've discussed, but ultimately it's going to be driven by the partners. And our pillars are going to be constantly reviewed. They're going to be focused on by all the members. And as things are identified, like Brian, I'm here in Ontario, but if there's something happening in Saskatchewan, I rely on the people on the ground in Saskatchewan to let us know of what needs to be looked at. So, we try to communicate with as many people across the country to make sure that their needs are being addressed and that we can be a collective voice and a collaborative voice with all of the organizations on the ground to make sure that we amplify and we speak for the millions of Canadians that are active in our hunting and outdoor heritage.
So what kind of letters, so for our listeners, what kind of letters are they going to see coming out of the CWCP? So there's already been, I think we've got 2 published on the website, plus our press release. Maybe the third one's up now. I'm not 100% sure. What is that? What do you envision? What's coming down the pipe? And can we talk about, I guess we can't really talk about what we have in the works that we're discussing sort of currently, but what do you, so you mentioned the access issue. Can we talk a little bit, and you guys feel free, anyone to jump in on this, about what are some of the other things that we're expecting to see? Do we envision a firearms license or a firearms licensing letter? What are some of the main issues that you guys are expecting that we'll probably see?
Well, I think first off the hopper, there will be a letter thanking Nova Scotia for those updates. I think access, you can anticipate letters on the access issue, that, we'll be looking into issues like that. And firearms, I think definitely that is a constant topic that is coming up. So where we can find some respectful language that all organizations can get behind and support when it comes to firearms policy decision making within the country, we'll definitely be looking at letters with that. And I'll let the other 2 weigh in on this too, but I think the sky's the limit in a lot of these issues as they come up.
Yeah, well, Chris took the easy answers. So, I think too, for as much as we talk about the pillars, and the pillars are important, there's a lot that falls under those pillars, right? On four pillars, we can build a pretty big building. So, there will be things that I'm sure will come up from partners of, hey, here's a new provincial policy on tag allocation, or here's a new territorial policy on access, or here's a new science approach on population management that is something we think is really great, or something we think is really terrible, or that's I think in a lot of ways the great thing about the design of the CWCP is we allow for these things to feed up from the partners. It isn't entirely from, okay, here's us as the steering committee and we're meeting under lock and key and we're going to determine the entire forward plan for the next 10 years of the outdoors community in Canada. It is a really collaborative, really, really discussion oriented model. And to say that I might be volunteering us for a little bit more than maybe the rest of you are comfortable with, but if there are issues out there that maybe you're a small organization, or maybe you're an organization that doesn't do a ton of like government relations, and you say, we have this issue, here's what we want to be able to advocate about, but like how do we really put this in a form of a letter that we think can be effective? That's something, bring that to us as the steering committee and say, hey, here's this issue that we want to tackle. Don't have us do your homework for you. If you can write it, please write it, and we'll take a look at it, maybe do some editing. But that's the great thing about this model, is because it feeds up from the bottom, and because we'll have eyes on plenty of hillsides and plenty of valleys, that we can see where this is coming from. And ideally and hopefully the partners will take a very yes and approach to this thing. My default position on behalf of the FIC in the CWCP will be that we will sign every letter that comes up unless we have a really good reason not to. And I would hope that members are willing to come into this in the spirit of collaboration, and partners are willing to come into this in the spirit of collaboration, that just because something doesn't necessarily affect you directly, but it is something that in the broader sense is something that could, or something that is in the space that you're concerned with, that you would sign on to it to encourage good things and discourage bad things. And that's where the strength of the CWCP will come from, and that's what will make us help us kind of go down the road that Brian was speaking to, of becoming the place where decision makers may end up coming to us before they make decisions and say, hey, we know you're going to end up writing us a letter about this if we don't talk to you beforehand. And that outreach may come to us, and we may say, okay, this is a really specific local issue, we should talk to the groups in your province, and here's the members of CWCP who are in your province. And I'm sure at some point down the road that we will come to issues that come up to CWCP, and I'll use one that's near and dear to me, is like, there may be a trapping issue that comes up, and I bring it to the CWCP, or one of the provincial or territorial trapping associations brings it to the CWCP, and only the trapping groups want to sign on. And that's the point where I can have the conversation, or us as steering committee would have the conversation and go, okay, maybe this should just be a Fur Institute letter. If there isn't a broad audience amongst the partners, maybe this becomes an FIC letter instead of a CWCP letter. But those are the kinds of, ideally in this new space that we're creating, that we can have those kinds of conversations, in a frank and candid manner, without, chairs getting thrown and punches getting eaten, because we do want this to be somewhere where we can be collaborative and work together. It's really easy for governments to put wedges between us, and that's what we've seen for the last insert how many decades here, and something that CWCP is designed to try and get us past and get us through. is to make it so that, we're starting to be able to dictate the terms to governments instead of the other way around.
Excellent. Brian, maybe if you don't mind, touch a little bit on what role CWCP will play in influencing wildlife policy at the provincial and federal levels. So we talked about the letter writing. Is that where it's going to end, or will there be more opportunity? Do you see the collaborative having an opportunity to weigh in more heavily beyond that, influencing policy at that provincial or federal level down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's probably a challenging question to really truthfully answer, at least at this stage. Obviously the heart of the collaborative is uniting organizations to get letters in front of politicians on topics X, Y, Z. Where it's in the way it's set up is it has kind of a structure built that folks have the ability and time frame to respond accordingly on a message that is clear and concise, and that everyone knows in advance. We have had some questions about, well, what happens if perhaps the CWCP is invited to testify at whatever level on whatever topic, or invited to meetings on whatever topic at whatever level. And although I wouldn't say that would be a hard no, generally it would probably stem from, Doug talked about the ground up approach, where we'll probably have heard of the issue or topic in advance because someone, potentially has already written a letter to us. And we would encourage, those organizations to get involved at that local level. Again, that's, we're all in different parts of this country, and our organizations are all spread out, and those are going to come up in a unique fashion. Is there an opportunity for the CWCP to, assist and support 100%? That's part of that inclusive opportunity. But I think in a situation like in that, I think it would be encouraged from the organizations who are really being impacted by the topic at a provincial level. Federal's a little bit different because it's going to impact us all. But again, I think the way the system is set up is that, in that situation, we'd lean heavily on who is the individual group who has kind of brought the issue forward. But there's going to be opportunities where we can bring people together on those topics. But really, it's about getting voices in a controlled fashion. Chris and I talked about this the other day about what happens if the CWCP was invited to testify on something, and it'd be a challenging conversation because we could talk about elements that we had probably written in a letter, but beyond that, we can't say with confidence that everything that we are going to say is backed by every organization that was on that letter. We could go as a representative of our own organization and talk about X, Y, and Z on that topic, and we could point to the CWCP in saying that there would be likely support on ABC of this, but we definitely don't want to put organizations in a state where they're like, then Brian said something, and it's not really what we really had in mind, right? So I know that's kind of a convoluted answer, and it's kind of a tricky answer or a tricky question to answer, but the letter approach is really going to be the main component of this to get the names there, and then hopefully that opens up additional dialogue and opens doors for the organizations, especially those ones that are really close to this situation, to have meetings, whether it's one meeting, whether that's 20 meetings, it doesn't matter, preferably more because they're going to hear more about it, right? But
yeah, great perspective. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that the one strength of the collaborative is that we have that national voice, but then, all these orgs, are on the same page too. We have a unified voice, and then people can go and advocate for their organization on certain issues as well. And that's not necessarily the CWCP's job on that aspect of it. So I think the one thing about it that's cool is bringing people together for a common unified voice. And then we don't have to get into the nuances of certain issues either, right? So, and who knows, maybe it changes, it takes on a different direction as we sort of grow the collaborative as well too. One thing I'd like to touch a little bit on, Chris, if you could maybe discuss a little bit of it. So we've been in business now for the better part of 3 weeks. What are some of the sort of questions that you're getting about people? Like, what are people's concerns? We've had great intake. I'll comment very frankly that I'm really pleased. We've got guide outfitter representation. We've got federation representations, like you said, representation all across Canada. So I think we've built something pretty cool and pretty special that people recognize, and we've got really strong numbers already. So to me, it's all very positive, and I know there's a lot of interest in people that are having discussions as we speak about joining. But what are some of the main questions that you're getting where people are like, I don't understand this and I'm not sure, or maybe some reluctance to join, although I haven't heard anyone say we're not joining, we're against this. But if you could comment on some of those, I guess, challenges since the launch.
That's a tough question. So some of the conversations I've had where people, the big question they didn't understand at the beginning was, is this a new organization that we need to get memberships for? So, really being able to communicate and to highlight the fact that this is just a collaborative that's bringing together organizations across Canada to write letters of interest to either letters of support or letters requesting a change in policy to politicians and elected officials. That was a big, once we explained that, people are like, oh, and a lot more organizations are like, that's exciting. They really like that piece. Obviously, there are some organizations that don't agree with the ideologies of some other organizations, and so that has been a tough conversation to have because there is some divide in the outdoors community, unfortunately, that we are navigating. And we've thought of that, we've communicated about that, and the big thing, I know Doug touched on it earlier, is when you come in the room for a meeting of the CWCP partners, you leave your differences at the door. We are coming together. We need to stand together to protect our hunting heritage, our trapping heritage, and our Canadian outdoor heritage. And ultimately, those are the issues that matter the most that we need to come together on. And so any differences, we leave that at the door and we come together and we stand together on the principal facts of those aspects. And so respecting each organization for their mandates that they have from their own membership, respecting each organization for the ideologies that they have. We don't always agree, even amongst the four of us, like for the most part, we all agree on stuff, but there is some changes and some policy changes that we are not going to be on the same page on, but we respect each other. And that's the biggest key that I think is one of the challenges, and that I'm having to communicate, is that we need to get back to a level of respect for each organization. And there is differences. There is all of these other things that come into play. And it's just, so I've been communicating a lot on that stuff. Overall, people are very supportive though. And just asking, the money aspect. Oh, is there a membership fee to join? Well, no, there's not. There might be, down the road, maybe we'll look at an advocacy event on Parliament Hill or at a provincial legislature, and those issues will be addressed at that time, and will be voted on and selected by the partners themselves. And so decisions like that will be made as a collective, as the partners. But ultimately, the feedback has been actually very positive, and I'm really looking forward to some upcoming conversations that I'm scheduling with some organizations that have further questions. And it's just exciting to see the support that we have so far.
Yeah, very cool. And we talk about respecting differences and leaving your for lack of a better word, shit at the door. It was, one of the early discussions we had with one of the first issues that came up was, there's this issue that we're looking at, and I believe it was Doug. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter who, but this letter came in, and we had a discussion. We're like, yeah, that looks like a good letter for the CWCP to support, and whoever the organization was. Like, I don't think we could sign off on it for a variety of reasons, but that's a great letter, right? And it's just, right away there's that mutual respect within the group about what we're doing, and I think it's really cool that we have this approach that people can sign on or not sign on and have that ability to influence things. One of the things I want to touch base on, and I'm going
Kyle, just to jump in on that thought, and I think this is important, is about that inclusivity and respecting people and respecting organizations. If we can't have good, respectable conversations with like-minded organizations, how can we expect government and elected officials to have good, responsible, respectable conversations with the outdoors community, right? So, hopefully this is an opportunity to, calm some waters, and bring those voices together, because at the end of the day, we as a collective group, we have to work with everybody, whether we like it or not. And there are going to be things that are wins with any government, and there are going to be things that are losses or perceived losses with any government, right? So that I just wanted to draw. I didn't mean to jump in there, but I think that's a really key point in that we strive to have good conversations and leave other stuff that we may not agree on at the side, but we can get to a point somewhere in a topic that we will all agree on. And if we can get there, we're going to be in a much better space.
So, to me, this brings up a broader issue, and like this is a little, I guess, divisive issue, but like I see a lot of in our space that there's a lot of like, I'm looking after my org and screw you. Like there's a lot of division in the hunting and I don't know. I can't speak for the trapping industry, Doug. I'm not, intimately familiar with, but in the hunting space, and you could, I'm not going to pinpoint certain segments, but I think you could all figure out if you looked at certain aspects of it, you're like, well, I'm not working with those people. Even though it's the very same issue, the thing where you need to actually be united on. So how are we going to be different as a collaborative? How are we going to navigate that and keep everybody, especially when it's a pretty big pot, right? We've got hunting and trapping. That's literally, what do we think, 2 million people? That's a lot of representation. So how do we keep everyone swimming in the same direction? Because we see it in certain little like microcosms within our space where these orgs are like, like I am not working with, like they're vehemently, like the conflict is internal. It's not, yeah, they have this issue that's broader, but really like they're spending more time fighting each other than they are dealing with these issues. So how are we going to keep everybody on board and sort of keep everybody in the same direction? And I see you got your mic off, Chris. So I know you got an idea there, but I'd love to hear how, and I know that's been, as a group, we've talked a lot about that. How do we keep everybody on the same page? So I want to hear how we're going to do that as a collaborative.
Well, so what I wanted to touch on is on that topic. If we think back to what year was it? 2016, when MP Nathaniel Erskine Smith tabled C-246, which was an animal rights bill moving animal rights in the criminal code up to the human rights section. There was a advertisement that was taken out in the Hill Times on Parliament Hill that had wildlife federations, animal use organizations, had agriculture organizations, and it was a giant one-page ad with all of these organizations that signed on to ask parliamentarians to vote against that bill. And just to see agriculture and hunting and animal testing and all of those groups that don't usually work together come together to advocate against a particular piece of legislation was super powerful. And to the point that cabinet sat in the House of Commons and voted against a piece of private members' business, which wouldn't, for those of us who are political junkies, that doesn't usually happen. So that's the big key is we need to be looking at the bigger picture. And, you know, government organizations, like we're all fighting for the same space, and yes, that happens. But I think we have to come together, because for too long we have been working in our own silos. And the big message that we need to get across is that we do need to come together and set our differences aside. If there's a squabble between two organizations, you guys can keep fighting it out, but ultimately we do need to come together under the guise of the CWCP for some of these issues. And I know Doug and Brian have their own thoughts on some of this stuff, but I just wanted to highlight that moment was such a huge moment that I always refer back to and think about, was that one-page ad with agriculture and hunting groups, because it had never really been done before, and I think it was super powerful, and that's what the CWCP has the potential to be if people can put their differences and leave them at the door.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm a big fan of the idea, and I think it was Clay Newcomb is one of the people, the person I heard it from anyway. I won't necessarily give him credit for coming up with it, is the idea of guarding the gate. That, like, we need as a community to guard the gate against the forces that are outside the gate. We don't have the luxury of fighting amongst ourselves anymore. And here at the Fur Institute, I represent trappers, I represent fur farmers, I represent seal hunters, I represent auction houses and fur brokers and retailers and manufacturers. I'm no stranger to people and organizations with long-standing hard feelings against each other. But for us here in the fur trade, is we've come a long way. I won't say we're entirely there. We've come a long way towards realizing that we need to work together against the people that want to get rid of us, more than we need to work against each other. And I think that that's something that as an outdoors heritage community, there's definitely places in the country where there's, conflict between trappers and hound hunters, or trappers and guide outfitters, or resident hunters and guide outfitters, or, insert group A, insert group B. But at the core of it, there's more that we agree on than we disagree on. And there might be some of those peripheral issues and, that need to be sorted out between two groups, or between two groups from two jurisdictions, or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's something we don't address here within the CWCP. You two guys go out the parking lot, fight it out. We'll be in here working on something bigger and more important. And that's really the way that I look at it, is that we need to be able to work together, because we are so much stronger together than we are apart. The reality of today is that there are a lot of people out there, for a lot of different reasons, that either want to eliminate the pursuits we enjoy, eliminate the things that are our livelihoods, or just take away the places where we want to be able to do it, or that we rely on being able to do it. And we need to deal with that. I would love for us to get to a place as the hunting and trapping community where the most important fights are the fights we have between each other, because that means we've won all the other fights. I look forward to the day where the most important things we have to deal with are the things that divide us, because it means that we have dealt with all of the things that are from outside our community that are trying to attack our community.
Yeah, and I'll just finish that off with, and again, going back to, I sit here in the glass as opposed to down here. I'm a believer that there's no such thing as a problem, that there's only opportunities. And, I think there's always an opportunity to massage a letter, or massage wording in a letter, that we can get the majority to get behind. Because we all talk about, we're really, when it comes to the main issues, we all believe the same thing. We just say it differently. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But there's a way that we can jig it, that we can all buy in, and we still get the same message across. I can still be more passionate about topic as an organization, but we can still support a message through a broader collaborative through the CWCP.
Powerful stuff, and a great message. So at the heart of CWCP, in the name, Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners, so wildlife and conservation, but really, the things that we're focused on within that realm is hunting and trapping. We talk lots about that. So when you look at what we're doing here and you look at globally or within Canada, what worries you the most about the future of hunting and trapping? What scares, what's the stuff that keeps each, and we'll go through, all three of you can comment on it. What keeps you up at night regarding, I guess, hunting and trapping in Canada?
I can start it off. Honestly, I want to see hunting and trapping protected for future generations. My niece and nephew, I want all of the kids of today to grow up and to learn more about our heritage. And there's so much heritage that Canada itself is actually built off of, that has to do with the fur trade, has to do with hunting as providing. And we're recording this on the Friday of Thanksgiving weekend, and there's a lot to be thankful for. And so I think I'm in this space because I love being in the outdoors. I love hunting, and I want to make sure that it is protected for future generations. And so I think that's always first and foremost, like, what can I do? How can I contribute to ensuring that future generations are always able to continue on with the lifestyle that I live and the lifestyle that many of us in the outdoor space lives.
Yeah, Chris, I'm right with you. I worry what the future looks like without a CWCP, and we don't come together, and the infighting continues. We came together a while ago, and we, hunting, trapping, fishing Heritage Day, nationally recognized day to celebrate our heritage activities. But we need to do more than just celebrate it on a day and have it, recognized. We need to be talking about it. We need to be celebrating it. We need to be encouraging. We need to be keeping that tradition alive, as Chris said, for future generations. So I worry about what could happen if the infighting continues, if we don't come together as a unified voice. We've got a lot of numbers. We've got a lot of great organizations. We have an incredible amount of opportunity right at our fingertips. We just have to reach for
it. Doug, you want to jump in with your thoughts?
Trying to get unmuted here. I definitely follow on with what Chris and Brian are saying, and to take maybe a different angle swing on the same ball. And this is something that we talked about, Kyle, last time I was on the show, is, I'm worried about Canada standing alone. I'm worried that our hunting and trapping community gets cut off from the rest of the world. And that means Canadian fur not leaving Canada because of trade bans. That means international hunters not being able to come to Canada because of restrictions by their governments or our government or otherwise. That means Canadian hunters and trappers getting cut off from firearms sent from, sold from other countries because of increasingly restrictive firearms laws. That at a point, Canada gets cut off from the rest of the world, and our hunting and trapping community ends up cut off from the rest of the world and becomes a less and less important consideration for our government. And that the Canadian government ends up falling in line with a lot of other governments that have been influenced by anti-hunting, anti-trapping, anti-animal use groups. And that we lose our standing with government. And that's something I hope that the CWCP can be a tool for, is ensuring that we are front of mind for government decision makers, whether provincial, territorial, federal, and that we then are front of mind for them, and the issues that we care about are front of mind for them, and that they ensure that the Canadian hunting and trapping community is supported, and supported not only here at home, but on the world stage as well.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, Doug, and it gave me pause for reflection when you brought that up, because I look at SCI Canada, we look at Delta Waterfowl, Wild Sheep Society BC. We're sort of recreational hunters as a general rule, if you look at it. But the economic perspective is incredibly critical, and that's where the trapping side of things, and like you said, the international side of things, where there's the guide outfitting, for instance, for example. There's this huge economic part that's so critical to what we're doing here. And if you take that economic perspective out, now government is, and it might be a pretty small part of the budget, but it still has that economic impact, and it's really important. And I think that, that made me reflect when you're mentioning all this, is that because I don't really think so much in those terms. I always think about sort of, not the economic perspective. And I think that that's super critical, because that is a big part of our driver. You look at how much money comes into this country because of the economic aspect of hunting and trapping. It's huge, like literally billions of dollars. I'm sure you have the numbers. I certainly don't, but it's a critical part of what we're doing. And I think that again, not segregating or parsing out parts of, representing the entire hunting and trapping space is super critical. And I think that's where CWCP is really going to have an effective role.
I just want to touch on that for a second there, Kyle. So most people know I used to work for Blaine Calkins, the Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister for Hunting, Fishing, and Conservation. And something he always said when we would attend meetings and on these specific issues is hunting and fishing in Canada is the only sort of activity where we use our after-tax dollars to pay the government to support the role and the mandate of the government to conserve wildlife. And so it's super important that we are protecting this and that we are advocating for these activities and these heritage activities. And so it was something you said about the dollars, and that is exactly it came to mind anyway, that I wanted to throw that in there, because it is a consideration that I think a lot of politicians don't think about, that these activities are all paid for with after tax dollars that we have as income in order for us to go and recreate in the outdoors. And trapping, these guys are going out after their day-to-day jobs to go out onto the trap line to harvest these animals to help mitigate flood and all sorts of other stuff, and conservation wetlands and whatnot, that the work that they're doing. So these are activities that are super important just to the government's role in managing wildlife and conserving space, that we need to also take into account and to consider. So
awesome. What can individual hunters, so okay, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they go, oh yeah, no, these are things important to me too, and I want to make a difference, what can individual hunters, conservationists, trappers, what can they do to support the CWCP? What do we need people to do? What's our call to action from them?
And I think the simplest way is if they are hunters who happen to sit on the board of a hunting organization or trapping organization, to encourage their organization to join. Or if they're not on the board, call up your board members, call up your president, and say, hey, this is something I think we need to be a part of. And encourage, we want to be as open door as possible. And if it's everything from a small local volunteer-led organization all the way to national and international organizations like some of us represent. There's no one we don't want inside the tent, really, from the hunting and trapping community. That it's really, this gets stronger with every group we have join, and we want people to understand that that's the hound hunting community, the falconry community, the hunting and trapping community writ large is really who we're here to try and represent and try and include. So if you are a board member somewhere, figure out when your next meeting is, put this on the agenda. If not, call up your president, call up the secretary treasurer, and say, hey, I want you guys to come listen to this podcast about CWCP, and after that, put this on the agenda for your next meeting.
Additionally, I think I can speak for all of us on this call or on this podcast that reach out to us too. We're always here. Reach out to our, like on the CWCP email. If there's a board meeting coming up and you want to hear directly from us, you think board members might have additional questions, we're here. One of us will be able to figure out our schedules to make sure that we can join in and answer any of those questions and help to clear up any questions that people might have, and hopefully convince your board that it's a great initiative to join.
I think one of the things that I like about what the CWCP is doing is it's a grassroots organization that's being driven from the bottom up. It's not the 4 founding partners of the steering committee in ivory towers saying this is the way the world's going to be run, and this is important to SCI, or this is important to Delta Waterfowl, this is important to. No, it doesn't work like that. It's driven by the partners that are involved, and it's grassroots, and they bring issues to the CWCP and they look for support. And if there's broad support for it, then we sign on, and it's going to be decided by the partners. This isn't something where 4 organizations. And maybe Chris, if you don't mind, just touch briefly on sort of the plan moving forward. According to our charter, once we reach the sort of critical mass that it's never been intended to be driven by SCI or the society or for Delta or for Institute of Canada. This is going to be driven by the grassroots organizations that are part of this organization.
Yeah, so we created the CWCP, and obviously the 4 of us are sitting on the steering committee right now, and the intention is that either 2 years or 20 partner organizations, we will revisit the composition of the steering committee, and we have that laid out as to how many members will be part of the steering committee. We'll ensure that there's regional and industry diversity on the steering committee as well, so that we can make sure that we're protecting the diverse views and ensuring that the steering committee is composed of organizations that will continue to share the common goals of the CWCP. And we're really excited. I'm excited to get to that number sooner rather than later, so that we can invite more people and have more people at the table to help. And quite frankly, the role of the steering committee is really just to make sure that the direction of the CWCP continues to advocate for the common goals of the CWCP as laid out in our constitution or our organization documents. And it's it's not the 4 of us, it's the collection of all the partners, and we're just helping just to make sure that it stays on that path. And we are really excited to expand and to get more organizations involved, and those that are able to step up to be part of the steering committee in future years as well. And yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. And I think that's the key part is it's called a steering committee. It's not like the leadership team or management or the executive team. It's a steering committee. Just keep everybody on track, going in the same direction. And I think that was our vision. And, I'll just speak. The exciting part for being me parting this group is we've all sort of had that same vision that we want what's best for hunting and trapping in Canada. That's our vision, and we've all been very big picture. And honestly, there's been so little conflict, and I think if as a community we had that, we'd be so powerful, man. Nobody'd be able to touch with us. If we just jump on these issues and sort of get behind the greater good. And that's been a very cool part of what we're doing. And I think, hats off to the 3 of you. And it's been great working with you. So get towards wrapping up here. Any last thoughts, anything that we're missing, anything we didn't touch on, anything that we want to share with our listeners about the program? Have we missed anything? Silence.
I don't think so. I'll just jump in to say, you're a big part of this, Kyle, and we definitely appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk about the CWCP and share with all the listeners. And I think I just want to reiterate that we're an open book. We want everyone under the same umbrella. And if there are questions that come out or you want some more clarity, reach out to us at any time. I think that's the message that I want to get out there on this Friday of Thanksgiving. It's never too late to ask a question. It's never too late to jump on. We definitely welcome, and we look forward to having those conversations with all the organizations.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Okay, let's do a rapid fire question here for fun. What is the one policy change you'd make tomorrow if you could? You wave a wand, change a policy. What's that policy you're going to make? What change?
Ooh.
We talking? I just want a little clarity before we get in here. Are we talking at what level? Are we talking at a national level or at a provincial level, or does it matter?
You get to choose. Absolutely, Brian. So, and honestly, it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be representing your org. I'm going to ask you to speak personally, so that way you don't get in trouble with your organization representing them. Because I probably could speak to mine as an organization, but if we could change one policy, so we're all in this because we want to affect change. We want to support hunting and trapping and the future and our heritage and all that stuff. So, you wave the wand tomorrow, you fix that. What would be that thing you fixed?
Kyle, look at you putting us on the spot.
I think we should make Kyle go first.
Yeah, Kyle.
It's going to be disease. It would be a national policy, and that's probably not likely to happen, but a national separation policy, domestic and wild sheep. And if we did that, I could just retire. I could go and off to greener pastures. So that's the heart of what we're doing for and I think like from a conservation perspective. Now hunting and trapping, that's a little bit of a shift there. But anyway, the disease issue for me, that's a big one. So
for me, I think it would be firearms. Me personally, working so long on the firearms file federally and then now within SCI, there's so much misconception about firearms out there, and we all know the logistics and the science behind them. So I would love to see better clarity around the Firearms Act and the classification system, and probably less attacks on the firearms that are owned by law-abiding citizens and licensed individuals that are RCMP vetted, and more focus on the illegal guns that are on the street and that criminals get their hands on.
That's a pretty good one.
I mean, I don't know if there's a policy that I could repeal that would make me a better hunter, but if there is one, I'd like to know which one it is, because that's one I'll get rid of. If I've got a magic wand and this magic wand extends beyond the Canadian borders, I would get rid of any and all bans on trade in wildlife products except for the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, because then I could retire.
That's a good one.
Doug
and I have actually been dealing with that issue. European Union
every day, all day, just vote for me lately.
They're all good ones. And I think if I could wave it and choose one, and I've got a few in my head, but I'm going to go with one that I think would help in all of those realms, and that is a sustainable funding mechanism in Canada, similar to the United States, Pittman Robertson, Dingell Johnson. If we could get something like that in Canada, that could help fund all of those areas, I think we would be in a lot better place. That's a tough question, though, Kyle. You're putting us on the spot.
Awesome. Well, those are great. Okay, so let's wrap up with Chris. Let's give us where we go, and then a bit of a call to action. So, like, not put anyone on the spot, but what do you guys want to see from partner orgs out there, people that are considering joining, or So just we'll start off with you, Chris, with where they need to go to the website and how to reach out, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so we're actually active on Instagram and Facebook now, so you can look us up at the Canadian Wildlife Conservation Partners on both platforms, and go to our website, canadianwildlifepartners.ca. All the information, all the contact details there. We'd love to have you part, and yeah, reach out. That's the best avenue is just reach out if you have any questions.
Awesome. Call to action. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
Don't be shy. Let's be heard in that reputable, respectful voice. If we ignore the small issues, they become large issues. So rely on all of us, the strength in numbers. We'll hear about it. We'll be able to act upon it. And don't be shy about putting something in. Don't be shy about asking questions. We welcome that, and we look forward to that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I'm gonna do the Gen Z hit that like and subscribe button for both this podcast and for our Instagram and Facebook pages. You may be a member of the Black Bear Society and sure. Or Fish and Game Club, that's really everything revolves around social media today. So find us, like us, share one post from us, tell your friends to share it to 3 of their friends.
The marketing guru wisdom of Doug Chiasson. Love it. Love it. And I think the one thing that I want to just share in closing is that we need to start working together. We need to get on the same page, and that's what CWCP is. We're hoping to bring this as a unifier, that we're all as a team, that we want to work together, and we're pretty darn inclusive. Our goal, the thing that we talked a lot about, is the big tent having everyone inside. We don't want any little microcosm. If it represents the broader, not even broader, if it represents hunting and trapping. And if we can get behind it, it's ethical, it's sustainable, it's good for hunting and trapping. You probably have a spot within our tent, and that's kind of our vision. So, don't think that, oh, do I belong there? You probably do. So reach out, have the discussion, and our goal is inclusivity. We're not gatekeepers. We really want the right people inside, and we want the big tent. So that when we show up in Ottawa, or we show up on a regional issue, that people go, oh boy, we need to listen to these people, because there's too many that we can't afford to. So awesome. I want to thank all 3 of you for it. It's been a lot of fun working with you, and it's so nice working with like-minded individuals. It's great, especially on these broader issues about hunting and trapping. I've learned a lot about the industry from you, Doug, the trapping side of things. And obviously we worked tons with trappers in the past, but it's been fun for me developing that relationship and building this with you guys, and look forward to great things from the CWCP, and grateful for your leadership and what you guys have done to date. So thank you all.
Well, thank you for having us, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Likewise.